guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Maria. I am the owner of Baffling Beads AT, a shop where I sell handmade beaded jewelry over on Etsy, and also a second shop where I sell check glass beads and brass supplies. If you're curious about my shops, you can find the links down below in the description box. This video is another beading tutorial, this time for these hoop earrings. You've already seen them in the short little clip beforehand. These are my Coburn hoop earrings. They are part of a jewelry set. You can also find the tutorial for the matching bracelet on this channel. So I find that these hoop earrings are not the easiest to make. There are some things that you need to pay attention to. So one of your questions might be whether you can use round beads instead of the cylindric beads like Miyuki Delica or Toho Treasure beads. I would advise against it. I haven't tried it, but I can imagine that it's hard to do with Rokal beads because the hole size of those beads is much smaller than those of cylindric beads. And because you need to pass through some of the beads quite some times. I think there are some beads that you need to pass through maybe 5 times, so there's a lot of thread in there. I would stick to cylindric beads, but of course feel free to try it with round ones, but it could be that you will shatter your beads at some point. Another point would be thread tension. So overall this earring is pretty stiff, so there is a lot of tension in there. It's not wobbly or anything, it's not super loose like a pure herringbone stitch, but you still need to pay attention to your tension. So you need to make sure that this herringbone stitch that we will use in these hoops, that you pull your thread properly, that it doesn't curve or turn or twist. So please make sure that the beads sit properly on each other. So if your thread is too loose, you will have twists in those columns, those kind of spikes, you know, those are the herringbone stitches. You may then have twists in there if there's too much loose thread. And if there's too much tension, then the columns of beads won't be straight. So firstly, you need to pay attention to your thread pulling, whether it feels too tight in your beads to not shatter them. And also you need to pay attention to the thread tension in your earring. It's somewhere on the easier side of intermediate. I feel like it's not super hard to make. You may need a few tries to get it right, but I think they are very pretty to look at. If you want to try out beading with this design, feel free to do so. I would advise you to use cylindric beads and also have thinner beading needles, like a size 10. I have 2 needles here, one's a size 12, one's a size 10, in case you need it and it feels too tight. For these earrings we will need both the brick stitch and the herringbone stitch. You can also find tutorials for these basic beading techniques on my channel, in case you're interested. But for now I will show you what we will need for these earrings and then we hop right into the beading process. These are all the supplies that you will need. So as you can see, there are not that many. You can make these hoop earrings pretty easily without having a huge bead stash. First I have these 3 cm sterling silver hoop earrings. If you're interested in this kind of endless hoop, you can buy these in my bead shop. You can check out the link down below. Or if you would prefer any other type of hoop, or maybe brass for example, you can check Etsy for buying your hoop earrings. Then I use the same thread that I use for all my smaller earrings and also my hoop earrings. This is Miyuki beading thread. It's a nylon thread size B. It's the silver color so that it matches the hoop earrings. Then you can see that I have 2 needles here. One's a size 12, one's a size 10. I would advise you to use a smaller needle as it gets pretty tight by the end of this beading project and you don't want to accidentally shatter your beads. So have a smaller or thinner beading needle ready for this. Then for the beads. I will keep it simple today. So these Miyuki Delica 11O beads, they are a matte white. Then Miyuki round beads 15O in a silver color. And then 3mm check beads. And because they are so colorful and they have their own gradient, I will keep it simple with the seed beads. And instead all the colors will come with these beads. So just to give you some examples of how you could combine your colors. Either you go with one color for the Miyuki Delica beads, one for the Miyuki round beads and some kind of colorful check bead. Or you can make something like this. This is pretty much tone and tone. You see that I used two different shades for the Miyuki Delica beads. So on the inner circle and all the outer beads, they are the darker shade. And in between you can see the lighter shade. And then I use two shades for the Miyuki round beads. All the tips are the dark color and all the tiny beads in between, those are a different, slightly lighter color. And the check bead matches with all the colors around it. So this one has a little more contrast in it. This one was made with a brass hoop. And also super simple, a crystal and white color combination. First I cut my thread. You will need an 1.5 to 2 arm length, I would say. So this is not quite 2 arm length that I have here. And then we will start with a double knot on that hoop earring. Leave some tail thread so that you can later on pull that thread into some beads so that you can hide the knots and secure it properly. First I will go with the slightly thicker needle and then we start this earring by beading a row of 38 beads along this hoop by using the brick stitch. If you want to learn more about the brick stitch, please check out the tutorial up here. But you don't need to watch it, you can just follow along and watch what I'm doing. So we start the brick stitch by picking up 2 Miyuki Delica beads. You push them down to the hoop. And we do a tight stitch. You go from the back to the front through your hoop earring. You go back through both those beads. You pull the thread through and pull it tight. I usually do it by pulling down so that these beads sit at an angle, right next to each other. And then you go up through that second bead. And then they will sit right next to each other like this. Try to get them as close as possible to that hoop. And now we will add single beads to the stitch. So you pick up another bead, you push it down, go from the back to the front, back up again through that bead, and you pull your thread through. You wanted to have it sit closely to the other beads. Pick up another bead, push it down, from the back to the front and up again through that bead. And pull tight. You need to continue this until you have 38 beads on that hoop earring. So when you have a few beads in that row, you need to check the positioning of your beads on this hoop so that you can make sure that the beads are at the same height of that hoop, because you want to have the beads all in this area and you don't want to have them positioned too far to the right or too far to the left, so that it's about the middle when you've beaded the whole row. Just push them a little if you think that you are too far along. When you've added all the 38 beads to your hoop, you can still adjust it a little bit. I am done with the 38 beads. I would advise you to count more than once, just to make sure that you've got the specific number of beads on there. So next we will bead those ends, so those two groups of 2 beads you can see here. And then we will continue by beading these columns of herringbone stitch you can see here, with those bead groups of 3 for decoration, and then column, another bead group, column, and so on until we're at the end with these 2 groups of beads. And then later on we will start to fill in the gaps in between the herringbone stitch. So I turn over my hoop so that I can bead from the top to the bottom, or in this direction. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads 15-0, and then you go through the second bead in that row to the back, through that hoop, and up again at the front, but only through that Miyuki Delica bead. Then you pull tight. Then you've got that first little tip. Then you go through that third bead from the back to the front through that hoop, up again, and you pull tight. Then you pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads, again, back to the front, through that hoop, and up again through both Miyuki Delica beads. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads and you go back down through both Miyuki Delica beads at the front. No need to go to the back. We stay at the front. Then you go up through that 4th Miyuki Delica bead on the first row, pull through, and you can adjust this herringbone stitch so that these beads sit at an angle. And then again we go through the 5th Miyuki Delica bead on the first row, from the back to the front, through that hoop, and up through that same bead. Now for the first column of herringbone stitch. We want to add 3 rows per column. So first you take up again 2 Miyuki Delica beads, go from the back to the front through that 6th bead, And this will then always continue for each column. This will stay the same. You adjust their angle so that they sit on top of those beads on the first row. And then you go up through both beads on the front of that hoop earring. So this is then the next herringbone stitch. You pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads. You go from the back to the front. You pull your needle through that hoop, pull tight, and then you go up through all 3 beads. We now add the third herringbone stitch. You pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads. You go through all the 3 rows of Miyuki Delica. You stay at the front like this and you pull through. So this is now the first column of herringbone stitch. Next, we add that group of 3 beads next to it. One Miyuki Delica bead, 1 Miyuki round bead, 1 Miyuki Delica bead. And you go back down through that bead next to the one you're coming out of, but you stay at the front. Like this. And this is what we're going to repeat now. So we will bead another column, then we add that group of 3 beads, then another column, then another group of 3 beads until we are down here where we add the last column, and then again on those 4 last beads we will add the same beads that we have here. So again, you go up through that bead on the right hand side, pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads, you pass through that bead on the right hand side from the back to the front through that hoop, you place those 2 beads on top of the first row, then you go up again through both rows. It's a little tricky because those on top always sit at an angle. Just wriggle them around a little until you're through all those rows. You pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads, and again on the left hand side this time you go from the back to the front through that hoop earring. You place them on top and you go up again through all the 3 rows at the front. And again you pick up 2 beads and you pass through all these 3 rows at the front. Like this. So if you feel like it gets too tight, too cramped in those beads on the first row, please switch out your needle. Just to make sure that you don't shatter any beads, try to not pull your needle through right at the center where all the thread is. Try to stay in between thread and bead so that there's not too much pressure in that bead. And also, if you have trouble to get your needle through, try to push your beads to the back or the front of that hoop a little bit so that it's easier for you to pass through the bead and the hoop with your needle. Okay, so that the beads don't sit right on top of that metal frame. We add another group of 3 beads. Miyuki Delica, Miyuki Round, Miyuki Delica. Go through that bead on the right hand side, you stay at the front. You make sure that these beads sit at an angle, just like a herringbone stitch. And then we add another column of beads. I've now added all these beaded columns. Now we will finish with these 2 groups that are still missing. So you go up through that 4th last bead on the 1st row. You pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads. You stay at the front and you go back down. And you go up through that 2nd last bead. So now is the time to change your needle if you haven't already, because in that last bead we will have that double knot, and there you always have the risk of shattering the bead if you go through it again. So now I have the inner needle. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads. You go through that last bead, staying at the front, and now go through that hoop, you turn it over, and you go up through that last bead, which is now the 1st bead because we turned over the hoop earring. You go back down through that 2nd bead, and up through both rows at the third bead. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads and you go all the way down at the fourth bead through both rows. And now looks all the same. We will now need to fill in those gaps in between those herringbone stitches. And for this, you very carefully pass through these 4 rows. Again, please switch out your needle, otherwise it's highly likely that you will shatter them if you go through this bead on the first row with a thicker needle. So let's check again these other earrings. If you count the beaded rows of those columns, you will see that there is the first row, which is a brick stitch, and then on top there are 4 rows of herringbone stitch. So first we will need to add another row of herringbone stitch. So you pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads again, and you pass through only 1 row on the right hand side, so that you place that herringbone stitch right on top of that column. And now you're coming out of that second last row, like this. You now pick up 1 Miyuki round bead, one of your 3mm fire polished check beads, and another Miyuki round bead. And you go through that bead on the opposite side where you're coming out of, so that you place this group of beads right in between. Pick up another 2 Miyuki Delica beads, you place them on top again, you go through only that 1 row of beads and you place them right on top. 1 Miyuki round bead, 1 3mm bead, 1 Miyuki round bead, and again you pass through that bead on the opposite side. You pick up 2 Miyuki Delica beads, we'll make another herringbone stitch, and place them on top. 1 Miyuki round bead, 1 3mm bead, 1 Miyuki round bead, and you add them again. Now you continue and you fill in all those gaps. I now add the last herringbone stitch. You don't go all the way down. You stay at that second last row of beads. Now we filled it in, and next we will add the tips. So for this we will need to go back I take up 2 Miyuki round beads, and as I said before, I'm coming out of that second last row on the right hand side. So we will go up right through that bead on top. So that it looks like this. So your thread is hidden, but it's on the outside of that Miyuki Delica bead. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads and you add that first tip on top of that column of herringbone stitches. You pick up 1 Miyuki round bead and then you go through that 3mm check bead, so that we now have 2 Miyuki round beads on this side. Pick up another Miyuki round bead to add another bead on the other side of the 3mm round bead. You can pull a little so that this column straightens down here. And then we do this again. We add another tip. You pick up 3 Miyuki round beads. You go down 1 row of that herringbone stitch. And you add that group of beads right on top. You pick up 1 Miyuki round bead. You pass through that 3mm check bead like this. Then you pick up another bead and you go through that very last row, through that first bead on the right hand side of that herringbone stitch. You pick up another 3 beads, go down again, only 1 row, and you place that tip right on top of that herringbone stitch. You pick up 1 tiny bead, you go through that check bead, you pick up another one, and you will continue like this until we're at this tip. So this is how it looks now. As you can see, we're almost done. We now need to add these 2 beads on this side that we have added there, so that it's the same. So you pick up 2 beads and you go through that bead below the bead you're coming out of. So here's the thread, there's the needle, so that you place those 2 beads right at the same spot where they are placed on the other side. Like this. So we're currently coming out of that 4th row. This means that you need to go down 4 rows. You skip the last row. You don't want to go through the last row. Only those lower 4 rows all the way to that hoop. Please be careful. Feel your needle, how it's going through all those beads. If it's too tight, try to find a spot where it feels a little easier to pull through. I do this always the same way, securing my thread. I use these thread bridges along that hoop. So you pass through that thread bridge on the left hand side and you use this one to tie a knot like this. Then you go up through that first bead, so only the first row, right on top of that thread bridge that you use, so that you can pull in that knot. Like this, and it's hidden. Then you go back down again through that bead on the right hand side. You go through the next thread bridge, tie another knot, and you go up through that first bead. Then I go down again through that bead on the right hand side. You now cut the thread. I only tie 2 knots, that's enough. We now need to secure the tail thread. So you thread that thin needle again and you go up through that very first row where we placed that double knot. And you pull in that double knot into the bead so that it now sits completely straight on that hoop. I go down through the bead next to it, and again I will place a single knot at the 3rd thread bridge. Up through that first row only, pull in that knot, and you go down through that 4th bead. And that's it. Now cut the thread. If it is a little wobbly, you can push those beads a little bit upward so that there's a little bit more space in between all those beads. Overall, it should be pretty straight and pretty stiff because there's quite a lot of tension in this earring. And this is it. Your first Coburn hoop earring. So I really hope that you enjoy these. I really like this design. It matches very well with my Coburn bracelets. It's pretty much the same style, you can use all the same beads for them, and you can make pretty matching jewelry sets with these. If you're interested in these hoops, in this color combination, you can find them in my shop with brass hoops and sterling silver hoops. If you're interested in only the hoops, you can find those in my bead shop because I sell them as beading supplies. They are on the pricier side because it is sterling silver. So it is to be expected that they are more expensive than brass hoops. Here they are. So these are the hoops I just beaded. Both of them. I really like the more simplistic color variations. So either tone and tone or just one color with some color gradient beads. But of course they also work fine with a bead mix. In case you don't want to bead them yourself and you're interested in buying a pair of these hoop earrings, please find the link down below. You can also find the matching bracelets in my shop. Let me know how you found this tutorial, whether you will try out this design, whether you used round beads for your earrings and how it worked out, what your experience is. Yeah, if you have any other input, I would love to read it. If you're interested in buying the hoops that I use, you can check out the link to my bead shop down below. I have sterling silver hoops in my shop right now, but sadly I don't sell brass hoops or gold-plated or any other type of hoop earrings. If you want those hoop earrings, just feel free to check out any online shop which sells jewelry supplies, or maybe check out the Etsy shops. There are many suppliers who sell 3 centimeter hoops, so there's a wide variety where you can buy from. But for now, I think that is all. I would love to read your comments, your feedback. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribe for more beading content in the future. I also upload vlogs once or twice a month. But this is it for now, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!